Hey guys, welcome to the 87th C programming tutorial, and in this tutorial we're going to be going over the second practice problem. So the second practice problem just says write a recursive function called count vowels that returns the number of vowels in a given string. You can assume that the letter Y is not a vowel. Use a helper function if necessary. Alright, so we just want to count the number of vowels in some string that the user passes to our function called count vowels. And we can use a helper function if we want. So I went ahead and wrote a helper function just called isVowel that returns whether or not a given character is a vowel. It returns a 1 if the character passed in is a vowel, and it returns a 0 if the character is not a vowel. So it could be a space or a question mark or a B or something. Doesn't matter. If it's not a vowel, it returns 0. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is just go ahead and write the prototype for our function count vowels. And we want to count the number of vowels in a string, so that would be a number. So our function will return an int, and we'll just call it count vowels. And then we need the person to give us a string to count the number of vowels in. So we'll just say character pointer str. Okay, so now the first thing that we need to do is just come up with a base case. And remember that the base case is just going to be the simplest input that a caller could give us. So the simplest input would just be an empty string. And by empty string, I mean this right here. So if they just called count vowels and passed in an empty string, which would just be 2 quotes like that, that would be the simplest possible input that they could give us. So we're just going to say if the length of the string that they give us is 0, so if it's an empty string, then just return 0. So if there are no characters inside of the string, then there can't be any vowels inside of the string, so just go ahead and return 0. So the next thing that we need to do is just think a step up from the base case. What would be another very, very simple input? And the next simplest input would just be if they gave us a string that is 1 character long. So that if they just gave us a string that looked like that, just A. So what we're going to do is, as long as the user doesn't give us an empty string, then we're going to go ahead and check whether or not the first character inside of that string is a vowel. So we're going to say isVowel on str at the index of 0. So we're just going to give this isVowel function the first character inside of the string. Alright? And then we'll just go ahead and return that. Okay, so let's just go ahead and check whether or not this function works right now. So we're going to say mod I, since this count vowels function returns an integer, and I always like to put a new line after it so that there's a space in between the output and the trash code blocks outputs. And yeah, so let's just go ahead and run this and see what happens. Okay, so we get a 1 printed out onto our screen. Okay, so what happens here is we just give this count vowels function this string right here that's 1 character long. It's just got an A inside of it. First, it comes down here and checks the length of the string. And the length of the string that we gave it is 1, so it doesn't return 0. It comes down here and it checks whether or not the first character inside of the string, and in this case, the only character inside of the string, is a vowel. And since A is a vowel, this returns 1. If we gave it B or some other non-vowel, it would return 0. So we got 1 out on side of the screen since we gave it A, which is a vowel. If we gave it something like, do something else, D, that will return 0 since D is not a vowel. Alright, pretty simple. But let's see what happens if we were to give it a really long, a longer string, a string that's longer than 1 character long. If we gave it something like 4 or 5 A's, I don't know how many there are right there, but if we just gave it that string right there, it still only gives us 1 because we only check the first character inside of the string. We only check whether or not the first character inside of the string is a vowel. So what we need to do is check the rest of the characters inside of the string. And believe it or not, it's this simple. We can just say count vowels on all of the characters following the character that we already checked. So we're just going to go ahead and check or count the number of vowels in the remainder of the string. So if we run this right here will actually work. That is the solution to the problem. But don't worry, we'll go over it a little bit more in detail later. Alright, so it gave us 5 since there are 5 A's right there. And if I were to give it Adam, it should return 2 since there are 2 A's, therefore 2 vowels in Adam. And yeah, that's what we get. Alright, so now let's go ahead and take a look at this in Paint and see why this actually works. Alright, so the first time that we call count vowels, we give it the string Adam. So I'll just go ahead and write Adam right there. And then over here, I'm just going to go ahead and draw what this string will look like in memory. And I'll draw that in a gray box right here. And then the null terminating character. And I'm sorry that my handwriting is so bad right now and that I'm writing so slow, but I broke my right hand, so I have to use my left hand to control the mouse. So I'm sorry if you're having trouble reading this or if I'm going really slow. But anyways, all these characters would be different bytes in memory, so I'll just draw a box in between them. And then, yeah, so we have 80 AM, and then at the end we just have the null terminating character. Alright, and then on the initial call to count vowels, str just points to this right here. It just points to the beginning of the string, so it points to this A right here. Alright, so the first thing that this count vowels function does is it gets the length of this string. And the length of this string 80 AM is 4, so let me just put that in parentheses right here. And then since the length of this string isn't 0, it jumps down to this line right here. So it checks whether or not the first letter inside of this string is a vowel. And since A is a vowel, it returns 1. So I'll do 1 plus. And then what happens is it makes a recursive call to count vowels. And it passes in a string to count vowels. It passes in the remainder of this string to count vowels. So instead of passing in 80 AM, it passes in DAM. So when we call count vowels for a second time, str is pointing to the D right here. Alright, and then I'll draw this recursive call down here. So it passes in DAM. Alright, so then it gets the length of this string, which is 3. And then it checks whether or not the first character inside of this string is a vowel. And since D is not a vowel, it returns 0. And then, once again, we make another recursive call. And now what we do is we pass in the remainder of this string. So we pass in AM. So on the next recursive call, str is pointing to this A right here. So we make another recursive call, and the input string is simply AM. Let me just move this in a little bit. Alright, so then it comes up here and it gets the length of this string, and the length of this string is just 2. And since the length of this string is not 0, we do this line of code right here. We check whether or not the first character inside of the string is a vowel. A is a vowel, so it returns 1. And then we make another recursive call. We pass in the remainder of this string, which in this case is just this M character right here. So on the next recursive call, str just points to M. Alright, so the next recursive call, we just pass in this string right here, M. It comes back here, gets the length of this string, which is 1. And then it checks whether or not the first character inside of this string is a vowel or not. Since M is not a vowel, it returns 0, and then it makes another recursive call. Now this is where things might get a little bit tricky, but it's really not that big of a deal. In the next call to count vowels, what happens is we pass in the remainder of this string. And the remainder of this string right here is an empty string. And this should make sense on our memory picture up here too. So we do M plus 1, so now str is just pointing to the null terminating character. And when we treat the address of a null terminating character as a string, that just means the string is empty. There are no characters inside of that string. So on this last recursive call down here, we're just passing in an empty string. So let's go like that. Okay, then it gets the length of this string right here, which is 0, and then it returns. So it returns back up to this green recursive call right here, like that, and then we can finally do this mathematical operation. So we can do 0 plus 0, so then this green recursive call returns, and we come up here. And the reason that it returns is it can finally do this mathematical operation right here. This is the mathematical operation I'm talking about. First, to get this first number right here, it called is vowel on M, but to get this second number right here, to get the right operand of this plus operator right here, it had to call count vowels again. So this count vowels function returned 0, so then it can finally do this math. Then this green function can return, and the orange recursive call can do its math. So the orange recursive call does 1 plus 0, which gives us 1. So we come up here, and now the red recursive call can do its math. So it does 0 plus 1, which is 1. And then now the black recursive call can do its math. So we do 1 plus 1, which gives us 2. Alright, and then finally this call returns here, and then it can do this printf, and it prints out onto the screen 2, since there are 2 vowels inside of this atom string right here. Alright, so that's it for this tutorial, so see you guys.